The room was alive with laughter and conversation, but in a split second, everything turned to chaos. My mother's face twisted with uncontrollable rage, and before I could even take a step back, her fist came crashing into my face. She punched me so hard that I stumbled backward, lost my balance, and crashed onto the floor. A sharp pain exploded through my cheek, my head spinning as I struggled to push myself up. But just as I tried to regain my footing, she attacked again, which was even more devastating. My name is Zoe Bennett, and I am 36 years old. If you had told me a few years ago that I would be standing alone, cut off from my own family, I would have never believed you. But life has a cruel way of revealing the truth about the people we love, and sometimes, the ones we trust the most are the ones who betray us the deepest. I never imagined I would be here, sitting in my small, dimly lit apartment in Chicago, watching my 8-year-old daughter, Lily, sleep peacefully. Her tiny chest rises and falls with each breath, completely unaware of the chaos and heartbreak that have brought us to this moment. I reach out and gently brush a strand of hair from her face, my heart aching with both love and sorrow. My story isn't a happy one, but it's real. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's that family isn't always about blood. It's about the people who truly stand by you. I wasn't always alone. There was a time when I had a husband who loved me, a home filled with warmth, and the hope of a future where my daughter would be surrounded by people who cherished her. But all of that changed the day my husband, Ethan, died. It's been nearly 2 years since that phone call shattered my world. I remember it like it was yesterday, the ringing of my phone early in the morning, the unknown number flashing on the screen, and the voice on the other end that delivered the words that destroyed everything I knew. Mrs. Bennett? This is St. Joseph's Hospital. Your husband was in a severe car accident. I'm sorry, but he didn't make it. I don't remember much after that. Just the feeling of my legs giving out, the sound of my heartbeat pounding in my ears, and the unbearable weight of realizing that my life would never be the same. I had no choice but to keep going. I had a daughter who needed me, a daughter who had already faced so much in her short life. Lily was born with a condition that made movement difficult. She required therapy, medical care, and patience. Now, she had lost her father, and I was the only one she had left. I thought my parents would step in. I thought they would be there for me the way parents are supposed to be, but I should have known better. My parents had always favored my older sister, Olivia. She was their golden child, the perfect daughter who could do no wrong. I was just there. You've always been independent, Zoe. My mother told me a few days after Ethan's funeral. You'll be fine. Fine. That was what she said after I had just lost my husband. After Lily had lost her father. The only real support I had came from Ethan's parents, Margaret and Robert. They picked Lily up from therapy when I was working, helped me with groceries, and never made me feel like I had to earn their love. You're not alone, sweetheart, Margaret told me one evening as she stirred a pot of soup in my tiny kitchen. We're here for you. Always. Her words warmed my heart, but they also made me realize something painful. Why did I feel more love from my in-laws than from my own parents? In the months following Ethan's death, I barely had time to grieve. Between funeral arrangements, endless paperwork, and making sure Lily got the care she needed, I was constantly on the verge of collapse. But I had no choice. I had to keep going for her. One thing that gave me a small sense of security was the life insurance payout of $180,000 I received after Ethan's passing. It wasn't an enormous amount, but it was enough to cover Lily's medical treatments, ensure her therapy continued, and provide us with a safety net. I was careful with every dollar. I still worked as a financial analyst, budgeting everything to ensure we would never struggle. But to my parents, that money wasn't for Lily's future. They saw it as an opportunity. At first, it was subtle hints. You should help your family, Zoe, my mother said one evening when I visited their house for dinner. Olivia and Daniel are struggling. He's the only one working, and with 2 kids, well, it's hard. I knew where this was going. I have my own child to worry about, Mom. I reminded her, keeping my voice calm. Lily's therapy is expensive, but they didn't care. Soon, it wasn't a suggestion anymore. It was an expectation. Family supports each other, Zoe, my father said, his voice firm. Olivia is sending us $900 every month. You should send $2,000. You can afford it. I froze. Olivia is sending you money? I asked, surprised. Of course she is, my mother replied, smiling with pride. She understands her responsibility. Something about it didn't sit right. Olivia had always been spoiled, always the one who received, never the one who gave. But at that moment, I was too exhausted to argue. And deep down, a part of me still craved their approval. So, like a fool, I agreed. Every month, I sent them $2,000. I told myself it was the right thing to do, that maybe, just maybe, this would finally make them see me differently. Maybe they would finally treat me as an equal to Olivia. I was wrong. Months passed and nothing changed. They still ignored Lily, still worshipped Olivia, still treated me like an afterthought. But the final betrayal was yet to come. A week before the family reunion, my mother called me. Her voice was unusually sweet, the kind of tone she used when she was about to say something I wouldn't like. I had learned over the years that whenever she softened her voice, it meant she was about to manipulate me into something. Zoe, darling, we're doing something different this year, she began. We're having an adults-only gathering. It will be a more sophisticated event, just the grown-ups enjoying a nice evening together. My stomach twisted. Something felt off. What about Lily? I asked, already dreading the answer. There was a pause. Then my mother sighed. Oh, well, she can stay with Margaret and Robert. You know how fussy she can get at these things. It's better this way. I clenched my jaw. Lily wasn't fussy. She was curious, bright, and loved being around family. But to them, she wasn't welcome. That night, I sat on the edge of Lily's bed, watching her sleep, my mind racing. I had done everything my parents wanted. I gave them money, sought their approval, played the role of the good daughter, and still, it wasn't enough. They had taken and taken from me, but when it came to my daughter, they had drawn a line. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just hurt, I was furious. I told myself I would go to the reunion, act polite, and figure out what to do next. But nothing could have prepared me for what I was about to walk into. The evening of the family reunion arrived, and I drove to my parents' house alone. The entire drive, my stomach twisted with unease. I had left Lily with Margaret and Robert, who welcomed her with open arms, as they always did. She had been excited about spending the evening baking cookies and watching movies. I told myself that at least she was with people who truly loved her. But deep inside, I felt sick. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed the number of cars parked outside. There were more than usual. My parents' house was brightly lit, music and laughter spilling out into the cold night air. A part of me held on to the ridiculous hope that maybe I had misunderstood, that maybe this adults-only event was truly what they had claimed it to be. I should have known better. The moment I stepped inside, I froze in shock. Children were everywhere. I saw Olivia's 2 kids running around the living room, giggling as they chased each other. Other cousins' children played near the fireplace, wearing silly paper crowns and eating cookies. The entire house was filled with laughter, warmth, and family joy, except for one thing. Lily was missing, because Lily was the only one who hadn't been invited. I stood there, stiff and unmoving, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. My mother spotted me from the dining room and flashed me a practiced, false smile. "Oh, Zoe, you're here, sweetheart. Come in." I didn't move. I couldn't. I just stared at her, then at my father, then at Olivia, at every single person who had lied to me. That was when Aunt Linda approached me, her brow furrowed in confusion. "Where's Lily?" she asked. "She's not sick, is she?" I swallowed hard, my fingers tightening around my coat. "She wasn't invited," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Aunt Linda blinked. "What? What do you mean?" I turned to face my mother, my voice steady but sharp. "That's what you told me, wasn't it? That this was an adults-only party. No kids." A suffocating silence spread through the room. Conversations died, and all eyes turned toward my parents. Olivia fidgeted uncomfortably, refusing to meet my gaze. My mother sighed, setting down her wine glass as if I was being unreasonable. Zoe, darling, you're making this into something bigger than it is. The other children, well, they know how to behave at formal gatherings. I let out a bitter laugh, cold and humorless. They know how to behave? I repeated, my voice rising. So, what exactly are you saying? That Lily doesn't? That my daughter, who is nothing but polite and kind, doesn't belong here? My father's expression darkened. Zoe, let's not make a scene, he said, his tone sharp and warning. I shook my head, feeling something inside me snap. For years, I had bitten my tongue. For years, I had swallowed my pain. For years, I had let them treat me like I didn't matter. But this was the final betrayal. And then, as if fate itself wanted to put an end to their lies, chaos erupted. Olivia's youngest son suddenly grabbed a handful of deviled eggs and hurled them across the room, hitting his sister in the chest. She shrieked, and before anyone could stop it, the other kids burst into laughter, running wild through the house, knocking over decorations and spilling drinks. I turned to my mother, raising an eyebrow. Oh yes, I see now. Such well-mannered children. Her face paled. She had no excuse left. But it wasn't over yet. I took a deep breath and spoke loud enough for the entire room to hear. For months, I've been sending my parents $2,000 every single month because they told me that Olivia was contributing $900. Isn't that right, Olivia? You've been helping them too, haven't you? Olivia's face drained of color. She stammered, looking panicked. I meant to, but you never sent them a single penny, did you? I cut her off. A collective gasp filled the room. Daniel, Olivia's husband, snapped his head toward her, his voice laced with anger. Wait, what? What money? Olivia opened her mouth, but no words came out. I turned to my parents, my chest heaving. So, let me get this straight. You manipulated me into thinking Olivia was contributing, just so I would send you more money? More gasps. My mother's face flushed red, and my father clenched his jaw, his hands curling into fists. Daniel stood up abruptly, his voice filled with rage. Olivia, tell me this isn't true. You've been lying about sending money? Olivia shook her head furiously, desperate to escape blame. They told me to say it. Mom and Dad said if Zoe thought I was helping too, she'd be more willing to send money. That was it. That was the moment everything shattered. I looked at my parents, the people who had raised me, the people who should have protected me, and all I saw was greed and shame. The room exploded with outrage. Relatives started whispering, some openly expressing their disgust. Aunt Linda folded her arms, glaring at my mother. So, you've been treating Zoe like a bank account while excluding her daughter? That's sick. Uncle Henry's wife shook her head. And all this time, we thought Olivia was the generous one. Turns out, Zoe was the only one doing anything for this family. One by one, people began gathering their coats, purses, and children. I'm not staying in this house another second, Uncle Henry said, shaking his head. A few others muttered in agreement, throwing my parents looks of disgust before heading for the door. But I wasn't done yet. I turned back to my parents, my hands trembling, but my voice steady. From this moment on, I will no longer be sending you any money. And I will no longer be part of this family. My mother gasped. Zoe, don't be ridiculous. Ridiculous? I repeated, laughing bitterly. You lied to me. You manipulated me. You excluded my daughter from her own family. No, I'm done. And with that, I turned toward the door. But just as I was about to walk away, my mother's mask of composure finally cracked. Her face twisted in rage, and before I could react, she lunged at me, her fist swinging through the air. In front of everyone, she punched me in the face. Pain exploded across my cheek as I stumbled back, my ears ringing. Gasps filled the room, and several relatives rushed forward to pull her away. For the first time that night, silence truly fell over the house. And then, Aunt Linda's voice cut through the air like a knife. This is unacceptable. You are not alone in this anymore, Zoe. She pulled out her phone and called the police. The room was completely silent. No more whispers, no more gasps, just the sound of my own heavy breathing as I clutched my stinging cheek, trying to process what had just happened. My mother, my own mother, had just punched me in front of the entire family. I felt the heat rising in my face, not just from the pain, but from the sheer humiliation and betrayal. My father stood frozen, his hands still clenched into fists, as if he wanted to say something but knew that anything he uttered now would only make things worse. Olivia looked away, shame flickering across her features, but she said nothing, just like always. The only sound that followed was Aunt Linda's sharp, unwavering voice as she spoke into her phone. Yes, I'd like to report an assault. The victim is standing right in front of me, and there are multiple witnesses. My mother's face went pale. Linda, she hissed, her voice laced with desperation. You don't have to do this. Aunt Linda shot her a look of absolute disgust.
No.
I should have done this years ago. Several family members murmured in agreement, stepping away from my parents as if they were toxic, as if they had finally seen what I had been enduring my entire life. I touched my cheek, feeling the dull throb of where her fist had connected. My mother had never hit me before, but now, when she had finally lost all control, when she realized she could no longer manipulate me, she had resorted to violence. She had shown her true colors. The weight of that realization hit me like a ton of bricks. I had spent my entire life chasing their approval, craving their love, believing that if I just gave a little more, if I just tried a little harder, maybe one day they would finally see me. But they never had. And they never would. I was done. The distant sound of police sirens filled the air, cutting through the tension like a blade. My mother stiffened, her breathing shallow. My father grabbed her arm, pulling her slightly behind him, as if that would somehow shield her from the consequences of her own actions. But there was no shielding her from this. The flashing red and blue lights from the police cars illuminated the driveway, casting long shadows across the yard. The murmurs of my relatives had turned into a thick, suffocating silence as the officers approached the front door. The tension in the air was so heavy that it felt like the walls themselves were closing in. 2 officers stepped inside, their expressions firm and unreadable. One of them, a tall man with a strong presence, scanned the room before his eyes settled on me. Who is the victim? Aunt Linda immediately stepped forward. She is, she said, motioning toward me. Her mother assaulted her. There are multiple witnesses. I swallowed hard, feeling the entire room's attention shift onto me. For a split second, I thought about stepping back, about saying nothing, about letting it go, just like I always had. But then I felt the sting on my cheek. I remembered Lily, my daughter, my reason for fighting. And I knew. This needed to end. I lifted my chin, refusing to let my voice waver. I'm Zoe Bennett. My mother punched me in the face. My mother's gasp was loud, like she had just been personally attacked. Zoe, don't do this, she pleaded, stepping toward me, her eyes wide with desperation. We are family. Family? I repeated, my voice laced with bitterness. You only call me family when you need something from me. The officers exchanged a glance before one of them turned to my mother. Ma'am, we need you to step forward. My father immediately tensed, his face dark with anger. This is ridiculous, he snapped. It was just a misunderstanding. You can't arrest her for something so small. She hit her daughter in front of an entire room of witnesses, the officer replied, unbothered by my father's growing rage. That's not a misunderstanding. That's assault. My mother looked around the room, searching for support, but none of the relatives came to her defense. They all stood in quiet judgment, their faces reflecting the weight of what had just happened. Even Olivia, who had spent years being their favorite, their golden child, the one who could do no wrong, even she looked away, unwilling to step into the mess my parents had created for themselves. For the first time, my mother realized that she was truly alone. Her breaths grew shallow as she turned back to the officers. Wait, no, please, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I didn't mean to. I wasn't thinking. Ma'am, turn around and put your hands behind your back, the officer instructed. I watched as the cuffs clicked around her wrists, a cold finality settling into my chest. She whirled toward me, panic flashing across her face.
Zoe.
Please, don't let them take me. I stared at her, at the woman who had spent years making me feel small, making me feel like I wasn't enough. And now, when she finally faced the consequences of her actions, she expected me to save her? I took a deep breath, feeling the last of my guilt melt away. You made your choice, Mom, I said, my voice steady. Now you have to live with it. The officers guided her toward the door as she continued to beg, her voice cracking with desperation. I'm your mother. Zoe, please. Don't do this to me. But I didn't do this to her. She did this to herself. As she was led outside, I turned my gaze toward my father. He stood rigid, his jaw clenched, his hands balled into fists. For a moment, I expected him to fight back, to shout at me, to defend her. But he didn't, because even he knew this was over. Without another word, the officers took my mother outside, guiding her into the police car. The door slammed shut, and just like that, she was gone. The weight I had been carrying for years, the guilt, the shame, the desperate need for their approval, lifted off my shoulders. And for the first time, I felt free. The moment the police car pulled away, I exhaled a breath I hadn't even realized I was holding. My mother was gone, taken away in handcuffs, and with her, the last remnants of my misplaced hope that my family would ever change. The house, once filled with laughter and conversation, now felt eerily silent. No one knew what to say, because what was there to say? I turned back to the room, and every single relative still standing there avoided my gaze. Some shuffled uncomfortably, others whispered among themselves, and Olivia just stood there frozen, her face unreadable. Aunt Linda was the first to break the silence. She stepped forward and placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. You did the right thing, Zoe. I let out a shaky breath, my chest still tight with lingering emotion. I know, I murmured, though I wasn't sure if I was saying it for myself or for her. Then, Daniel, Olivia's husband, spoke up, his voice laced with disbelief. So, Olivia, he said, turning toward her, you mean to tell me that all this time, you've been lying? That you never actually sent them money? Olivia's eyes widened, and she quickly shook her head. Daniel, I was going to. Save it, he snapped, his voice filled with disappointment. He let out a harsh laugh, rubbing his face. I can't believe I've been working my ass off while you sat there and let your sister handle everything. Do you even realize how selfish that is? Olivia opened her mouth, but nothing came out. For once, she had nothing to say. Then, Uncle Henry, one of the older family members, sighed loudly. You know what? I'm done with this family's nonsense. Zoe, I'm sorry for how they treated you. He shook his head in disgust before grabbing his coat. I won't be staying here another second. One by one, the others followed. Some of them approached me, offering soft apologies, some genuine, some empty gestures to save face, but I barely acknowledged them. My heart was pounding too hard, my emotions too raw to process their words. I watched as my relatives picked up their things and left, the once lively house growing emptier and emptier by the second. Eventually, only a few of us remained.
Me.
Aunt Linda, Olivia, and my father. My father, who still hadn't moved from his spot. I turned toward him, and for the first time since everything had unraveled, I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no longing for the approval I had spent my whole life chasing. Just emptiness. He finally looked at me, his eyes cold and calculating, like he was assessing me, trying to figure out how to regain control of the situation. But this time, there was nothing he could do. You've ruined this family, Zoe, he finally said, his voice low, dripping with resentment. I let out a bitter laugh. No, Dad. I just finally stopped letting this family ruin me. His lips pressed into a thin line, and for a split second, I thought he might actually defend my mother. But then, without another word, he turned his back on me and walked away, disappearing down the hallway. And just like that, it was over. I felt Aunt Linda squeeze my hand. "Let's get out of here, sweetheart." I nodded, not needing to be told twice. I didn't look back as I stepped out of that house for the last time, my head held high, knowing I was finally walking away from everything that had ever tried to break me. The cold night air hit me as I stepped outside, but for the first time in my life, I welcomed it. It felt like a cleansing breath, washing away years of pain, guilt, and the suffocating need to belong to a family that had never truly accepted me. Aunt Linda walked beside me, silent but steadfast, her presence a quiet reassurance that I was no longer alone. I reached my car, my hands gripping the steering wheel tightly as I sat there, letting everything sink in. It was over. The weight I had been carrying for years was finally gone. I didn't have to prove anything to them anymore. I didn't have to earn love that should have been freely given. As I pulled out of the driveway, I felt nothing but relief. By the time I arrived at Margaret and Robert's house, the tension in my chest had started to fade. The moment I stepped inside, I was greeted by the warm scent of vanilla and cinnamon. The house was filled with light, the kind of warmth that my parents' house had never had. Then I heard her. "Mommy." Lily's small feet pounded against the hardwood floor as she ran toward me, her face lighting up with excitement. She had flour on her nose, and her tiny hands were still sticky from the cookie dough she had been rolling out with Margaret. I crouched down and pulled her into my arms, holding her so tightly that I could feel her heartbeat against mine. "Hey, sweetheart," I whispered, burying my face in her soft curls. Margaret and Robert stood nearby, watching us with kind, knowing smiles. "Rough night?" Robert asked gently. I let out a breathy laugh, nodding. "Worse than I imagined, but also freeing." Margaret walked over and wiped a smudge of flour from Lily's cheek. "Good. Because you don't need them, Zoe. You never did." She was right. I had spent so much time chasing their love, but the truth was, I had already found real love right here. Margaret and Robert had been more of a family to me than my own parents ever were. I sat down at the kitchen table, watching as Lily excitedly showed me the gingerbread cookies she had decorated. There were uneven icing swirls, too many sprinkles, and slightly lopsided shapes, but to me, they were perfect. Then Lily did something that made my heart swell. She picked up a piece of paper from the table and held it out to me with a big, proud grin. "Look, Mommy. I made a picture." I took the drawing from her small hands and felt my throat tighten. It was a simple, colorful sketch of a family. Me, Lily, Margaret, Robert, Aunt Linda, Uncle Henry, all of us standing together, smiling. But my parents weren't in it. Olivia wasn't in it. Just the people who had truly been there for us. Lily tilted her head, her little face full of curiosity. "Mommy, are Grandma and Grandpa ever going to come back?" I stared at the drawing for a long moment before I answered.
"No, sweetheart.
We don't need them to." She blinked, then smiled as if that answer was more than enough for her. And as I watched her go back to decorating her cookies, laughing and giggling with joy, I realized something. For the first time in my life, I wasn't looking for my parents' approval. I wasn't waiting for an apology that would never come. I wasn't hoping they would change. I had everything I needed right here. I was free. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more powerful and emotional narratives, make sure to like this video, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us bring more incredible stories to life. Stay tuned for the next one.